Ever said eggplant and gotten a blank stare from a Brit? Or confused an American by asking if you could chuck something in the bin? Don't worry, you're not the only one. Many of my students over the years have had a funny mix of American and British vocabulary. Today, we're going to see which side of the Atlantic your vocabulary belongs to. Will it be British, American, or a bit of both? In this video, we'll cover a number of words that are completely different in American and British English. I have sorted them into the following categories to make it a bit clearer. Number 1, food. Number 2, travel and transportation. Number 3, household and everyday objects. Number 4, general vocabulary. In each case, I'll show you an image and give you a few seconds to say what you would call it before revealing its name in each country. Section 1, food. Let's begin with one of the most confusing topics. First up, what would you call this? Americans would call these chips, whilst Brits would call them crisps. This one is so confusing. Trying to figure out what someone wants to eat always turns into a 20-question game, asking if they want something warm or cold, trying to work out if we should go to the chippy or go to the shops. Now, what about this? Americans would call these fries, whilst Brits would call these chips. See, it's a complete mess. Next, what about this big purple vegetable? Americans would say eggplant, whilst Brits would say aubergine. The difference is huge. Fun fact, the word aubergine is actually a French word. Let's try another vegetable. Take a look at this one. Americans would say zucchini, and a Brit would call it a courgette. This is another battle of language influence, with zucchini actually coming from Italian and courgette from French. How about a little treat? What would you call these? An American would say candy, while a Brit would call them sweets. You would very, very rarely hear a British person use the word candy. Last one for this section. When you're in the seafood aisle, what do you see? Americans would say shrimp, and a Brit would say prawns. Section 2, travel and transportation. Now, let's hit the road and explore some common travel and transportation terms. What would you call this? Americans would call this a crosswalk. We Brits call it a zebra crossing. I always found this name so cute, and it's pretty self-explanatory. The stripes look just like a zebra, or as an American would say, a zebra. Now, what's the path next to the road called? An American would call it a sidewalk. Here in the UK, we walk on the pavement. Let's look at a major road. What do you call this? Americans might say freeway or highway, but we Brits call it a motorway. What would you call this huge vehicle that carries goods on the motorway. An American would say a truck, whilst a Brit would say a lorry. When I had elocution lessons growing up, we used to do a tongue twister with this word. I really recommend you try it. Red lorry, yellow lorry, and you repeat again and again. Red lorry, yellow lorry, red lorry, yellow lorry. The goal is to say it as fast as possible without tripping over your words. Now, where do you leave your car when you go shopping? Americans would say parking lot, and a Brit would say a car park. Section 3. Household and everyday objects. Okay, we've travelled a bit. Now let's go inside the house. What would you call the place where you throw away your rubbish? Americans would say trash can. Brits would call it a bin. When you go to bed, what do you cover yourself with? Americans would call this a comforter, which is actually quite sweet. Here in the UK, we use a duvet. This one always trips up non-natives because it's not generally taught in schools. And if you only read it, you might accidentally pronounce it as duvet. This is actually another word coming from French. So the end is a bit like the word ballet. What do you turn on to get water? An American would call it a faucet, while a Brit would call it a tap. Before I knew what it was, a faucet always sounded very fancy to me. So I was really disappointed to find out it was just a regular tap. Now, what's the name of the thing you use to dry dishes? Americans would say dish towel. Brits would say tea towel. Fun fact, British people love a unique tea towel. They often buy them on holiday with an image of the place they've been, or during royal celebrations like a jubilee or a wedding. Section 4. General vocabulary. Let's finish up with some general words you might hear. What do you put on a small cut? Americans would say band-aid, and a Brit would say a plaster. What about this device you're probably watching me on right now? An American would call it a cell phone, whilst a Brit would call it a mobile phone, or just a mobile or a phone. What about this item of clothing? This is a hilarious one to confuse. In the UK, what Americans call pants, we call trousers. What do we call pants? Underwear. What about this? Americans would say vacuum cleaner. We Brits simply say a Hoover. A fun fact about this one. Hoover is actually the brand name of a vacuum cleaner company, but it was so popular that it became the generic word for the item. There you have it, a comprehensive breakdown of some of the biggest differences between American and British English. Now for the big question. Did you find you were more American or British in your vocabulary? Leave a comment below and let me know. If you want more practical tips and real-life English expressions delivered straight to your inbox, don't forget to subscribe to my free newsletter. The link is in the description. Also, follow me on TikTok and Instagram for some quick tips. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time!